I was thinking because I didn't want to watch you guys.
Oh.
So we broadcast for 8 hours, people.
So
Noted. Are we broadcasting now? Are we live?
We are.
All right, we're live. So don't say anything you don't want on TV.
I never swore. I never swore. But it doesn't want to be part of the solution.
No.
Sarah's not here.
Well, you want to give me your copies of it?
This is the one Sarah collated.
Oh, so she
Yes,
did,
she
okay.
has that.
Because I was gonna
That's this one.
start a whole new one today and I ran out of time.
Then here's that. One for records. Well, let me, I'll gather all the record stuff right here in a second, okay? And then
We can give those.
But I will provide you with my personal copy later in the week. And let's,
do you want
we're gonna get that back.
and
to
this
Sarah.
is the one for the doctor working file. Then this one is mine.
Okay.
Michael, I already gave you his.
You did, yes.
Oh, okay. So go ahead, copy paste.
So I did.
All right, so that's mine. Copy of mine, you can. Okay. Okay, so we have ones, no's. Put it in the copy. Do you have a copy for him?
No.
Residential.
Where's the one I gave Sarah?
Okay, well, let's wait on her then.
I mean, I'll redo it, but it's a copy of.
Well, and.
And my apologies not to make.
Yeah, we can just absolutely.
I didn't go look at it.
Yeah.
The process that he's going to might put back on. And electricians, sure okay.
Quarters. Oh, they'll be in.
Can't imagine having to do this for now.
So should we wait a few minutes for Sarah to know?
Call here, Adam.
Well, it's not you because it's your evaluation.
I mean, she can jump in when we start. I don't know how we're planning.
Motion vote.
I don't know how you're planning on running it, so I guess it depends if it affects the way you want it.
Bring it. Bring it. I'm with you.
Do we have to do the
Hold a special meeting. So yes, you have to call it.
This is a special meeting of the Livingston City Commission to discuss the evaluation of city manager Mark Cardews. Mike, seriously. That other guy, your twin, Mark. Mike Cardews. I thought we'd start the meeting with just a discussion since we have a few minutes on process. And Sarah's not here yet, and then she can just give her feedback on process at that time. Oh, roll call, please. I forgot roll call.
Chairperson Hoagland,
Here.
Commissioner Switz,
Present.
Commissioner Friedman.
Yeah.
Commissioner Sandberg,
Present.
Commissioner Maybe. Here.
All right, so Sarah, we were just starting our discussion on process. I handed out the collated evaluation. I gave a copy of my evaluation to each of the commissioners as well. And, we're going to discuss process just to make sure that we're on the same page for the future, because this is the 6-month review, but according to the contract, after the first year, we go to yearly reviews. Correct? From what I know of the contract. Jay, everything that's correct? Okay. So for our next review, which will be in October, as far as process, we can discuss first the form. Secondly, about the feedback on the collated document. And then third thing is process of how do we disseminate the information and what do we want to do to make sure that Michael gets the information in a timely fashion, we get information. I know sometimes timeliness is not easy, so that's something we all, I think, deal with. But we want to just discuss how do we want to move forward in the future as far as how we document, how we get the information to him, and et cetera. Okay? Everyone okay with that?
So as far as timeline, I think it specifically states in the contract that he has to have it within 30 days of the evaluation. So are you referring to a different timeliness?
No, just getting it to him before the evaluation time.
So you want it to him before the evaluation?
Well, I think that's our discussion. Is one of our
Okay, well, that's what I'm just
discussion
trying to understand, because as far as the contract itself states that you must receive it within 30 days. So I guess if we wanted to get it to him prior, we should just set, what is it, 3 weeks before that we disseminate the evaluation forms, somebody compiles it, and then that information goes to the chair, which then the chair can provide a copy for the, I'm just throwing that as a suggestion, for the manager to review prior to the evaluation. And if with a compilation that we tried this time, for me, that's enough. I don't need to see everybody's individual, evaluations, because this is just an absolute direct reflection of that. So personally, I don't think that I need to see everybody else's evaluation because I have all the information I need here. And that's just my thought.
Good. What do you think? What are some of your thoughts?
Being so new at this, I'm generally looking to professionals that have been doing it, such as yourself. And
I'll give some feedback on this.
so, I do like, the form that we are using. I think it's comprehensive. Stuff like that.
Well, we didn't use the scoring system, so speaking of the form,
Yeah, I
should
didn't
we,
score.
should we take out the scoring system other than the above average and, 1 is for that?
Yeah, no.
As
keep
far
that
as
in
the-
place, that's fine.
So to give history on it, so initially, and I took it out of my document
Yeah, I
because we
didn't.
didn't use it, I cut it out.
Oh, you cut it out. I didn't even.
So on yours, you might see it on the one I sent you, but the initial part was when we created this as a commission, we wanted to put more value, or like the score would have more value in the goals and achieving the goals, which we don't have in here at this point.
Right.
Okay, so that would have been right here at the top. So because we wanted, and that was also a city manager's want and reflection at the time. So it was kind of a group discussion and group decision. But because that isn't here, we didn't need to do the scoring, but on the other hand, if the goals are in there and you're putting more emphasis on the goals and your percentage of the overall score of the evaluation would be higher, let's say 60%, 40%, like that. Okay, so that's where that came from in the past. Now that we're not addressing goals or haven't, do we want to continue? And maybe Mike, if you want to give us that feedback on, is that something you appreciate, is having the goals and with that addressed in the evaluation as well, or is that could be done in another way? Commissioners, what do you think?
I'll just do it directly for the sake of time.
Mhm.
I think that this part of the conversation should be tabled because we're gonna run out of time to do the evaluation. But I thought we discussed that with the strategic plan and our own goal setting, that the city commissioner goals would be derived from that. And so,
They'll
Which
go
is-
back in.
right, but if we're going to be evaluating him annually, then if we were having our session tomorrow,
Mhm.
I would suggest soon then that we get together to sit down and design those goals. So for the city manager, so he has the full year to work on them and knows what he's going to be evaluated on. And that definitely, I mean, should be evaluated on his goals. And then we can, and I guess I'm just reflecting because I thought that's what we had discussed earlier. Once we got the goals set for the city, we would know what the city manager goals were. And so I think that needs to happen within the month. And then we provide those goals to Mike, and he knows then this is what I'm going to be evaluated on next year. And he has that year to work on that.
So is everyone comfortable with moving forward in that manner for the future of how we incorporate the goals into the
I think so,
evaluation?
yeah, I think so.
Okay, and then,
And I just have one other question. So I saw that Mr. Cardo sent out a request for more benefits of his contract. And I was not under the impression that we were negotiating contracts. I always thought that those were two separate entities, that somebody would make a proposal to negotiate a contract. They didn't necessarily coincide with the evaluation. So I think we need to define that process too, obviously not tonight, because again, we're running out of time, but how, it's not really documented anywhere. But I personally was not prepared to have the contract negotiation discussions. I thought we were clearly just doing an evaluation.
in our past, we have had that in the evaluation process, requests by the city manager. So I don't know if anyone else has feedback on it, in their,
Would HR have any feedback on?
Generally speaking, with the process, what we have done is those requests have been integrated as part of the overall compensation discussion, which when you start the initial contract, you have a set amount of compensation, and then subsequently it becomes an addendum to the contract as you address through the evaluation process. Which is how we've handled it in the past, although historically we were at a standard 2% increase for several years for the prior city manager.
and is that done during the evaluation historically? Or
Historically,
started-
evaluations have been done, yes.
But I guess I was not aware of that, I was not told that, and I think it's up to us as a commission to decide how we want to do that.
Yeah, especially,
think
you know,
the
especially if
contract-
it's not spelled out anywhere.
A contract negotiation is an important discussion, and I'm personally not prepared to have that conversation tonight. But I thought we were going to do an evaluation. So that may have been done in the past, and perhaps people knew that, but Warren and I were not aware that contract negotiation was part of the evaluation. So I don't think it's fair and an appropriate item to be discussing when we were not privy to that topic of discussion.
Okay, so as far as feedback of when, Warren, do you have an idea on when you would like to discuss the negotiation aspect of the contract and in relationship to the evaluation
Well, the only thing I have a solid opinion on, I don't think it should be linked to tonight's evaluation. As far as when, whenever, as far as HR goes, and whatever is best from your point of view, or obviously sooner rather than later, but the exact timeframe doesn't matter, just that it's separated.
And we have approved it at commission meetings to maybe discuss during evaluation, but put on the agenda for a discussion item and approval or an action item. And I think we did that as well as commission, the four of us.
I think it makes sense to have it coincide with the evaluation, but I figure since we had just given him a $10,000 raise, I was completely caught off guard. That was part of the contract, that after 6 months, he would get 10,000. So, I'm sorry. But I think they should coincide. I guess it's just again
You don't want to make a decision.
we have to get away from the assumptions that this is how we've always done things, but yet we haven't educated the new commissioners to the process so they can be prepared.
And that's why we're trying to discuss it tonight, so we're better prepared. I think because this is the first time we've ever done an evaluation in a 6 month. In the time I've been on, Mel, you've been on a lot longer. We have never done a 6 month in that time, have we? So that does help us to just kind of conclude how we're gonna move forward.
And
So we're not,
when's my anniversary?
First of all.
That's what I thought, yeah, we passed them, yeah, okay.
but October is our official evaluation time, is that correct, or is this? Because we got our first one.
The 1st of April is the annual. So the next one, unless you
Oh,
want to do
yeah.
a 6 month, unless you want to do a 6 month feedback, the next annual will be next.
So, yeah,
Okay.
we're kind of behind as it is. So
All right,
that's what I
I
was wondering.
flipped the two.
Yeah,
Um,
it seems like you only been here 6 months.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
So
That's a good thing, I guess.
just the last thing is, one of the issues, and I didn't say, I have said this to Quentin when we talked about this, but one of the problems that in the past, and I think it's a very valid one, and I'm going to just preface that I believe we need to do this, is the working file of city managers of the past was very weak in referencing to like projects and goals and achievements or good evaluations, bad evaluations. We didn't have a lot to go on when you're looking at how to improve someone's work. And so, or to, move someone within their job. So the point is that I don't think it's fair to the future commissioners to leave them with poorly written or not written evaluations. Okay, so I believe that we need to have a working file where he has and he does, just like any employee, has a file with then our evaluation should be in there individually for future commissioners. Because we are only here for a short time. We need to think about the future because he could outlink all of us in his position versus us. So that sets our future commissioners up better. I don't know what you guys think of that, but I think we need to have every evaluation in there from each of us. I would need that.
That's what's admitted that.
No, it hasn't. No. And that's why then goes to that the last part before we can move on. But then from there, we should get him a copy as soon as possible, at a timeline so that he can look at an individual commissioner comments as well. So that he's looking at, maybe something he's missed on with one commissioner versus another. And that's, that's feedback on the individual relationship of the commission to the city manager, or commissioner to the city manager. So I think that he should get a copy from each of us as well. Are you guys okay with that, or do you have any feedback on that?
I thought that's what we were
Okay,
So,
sooner than later though, as well. I just wanted to make sure we
Well,
clarified
yeah.
that, because
What do you
you just
mean by-
said that we didn't have enough, some of the information we didn't know. And I don't want to assume everyone
right.
has the same opinion.
So when you say sooner or later, again, I'm thinking, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. So to me, by providing him tonight this, and then our individual, that allows him to read them and he can communicate to us one-on-one. He has the ability to schedule a meeting if he wants to meet with us again as a whole. Are you thinking again that he should receive this? You want to see it like maybe a week before the
Yeah.
evaluation?
I
Okay. So I think I have no problem with that. I think all of these things, we just need to get them documented somewhere. So
Yes.
we just have the policy
So we're consistent, yeah.
and this is how it rolls and the same, the same thing. if-
We talked about that, I talked to Mike about that, so I agree. I think we need a little document, so it rolls on to the next commissioners, that they don't have to rewrite what we're already writing, and we can take what other people, have in the past.
And where's the reminder a month before the evaluation is due that we're starting to work on it? Whose responsibility is that? And
Yeah.
we just need to document all that.
HR.
But I think it's our responsibility.
Yeah, no, but I mean,
Well, and Lisa reminded me, thankfully,
Right,
of
I
it,
mean-
and I was like, oh.
But
yes.
that shouldn't, I appreciate it, but it shouldn't happen. We need to come up with a system that works for a commissioner. And future
no, but I'm
commissioners.
saying if we're losing track of time and, I
And she
appreciate
does.
HR to say, the evaluation's due in 2 months, start thinking about
Right,
what
and
you're
then
doing.
that was just, that's all she said.
Right.
And to me, it's like, don't, reminder, evaluation, should be in April. Oh, yes, okay. Then I brought it up to the
Yeah.
commission.
Yeah.
And so yes, everyone, I think it's an agreement that we need to document. Get a little list, maybe, it could be a simplified list of our process. That we also will put, or give him an evaluation at least a week ahead of time so that he can review it for the actual evaluation. Anything else just right now? And then overall feelings on this,
Yeah.
wanting to continue with this kind of document or not, I guess.
The other,
And I'll just quickly now explain the calculation, how I did it. So I didn't have Mel's, but before I had, they're basically the direct questions from the evaluation. And I dropped in everybody's scores and then just averaged them, so there's an average. And then so like for question 2, not everyone provided feedback, but those that did, I just copied it and pasted it word for word on there. And so I did that for each question. So it's showing, it doesn't show the name by commissioner, but we can add that. I'm not sure how important
Well,
that
he's
is.
gonna get a copy of them anyway.
Right.
As long as, whatever I write, I want verbatim.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, and you can check.
Yeah.
I copied and
No.
pasted, well, except yours, I can copy and paste it, but I think I typed it correctly. And then, same thing with the strengths. I just took everybody's written strength comments, et cetera, and just threw them in here. So I thought it would be a concise way for the city manager to see everything on one document.
Right.
And then when he sees an outlier or something different, he can go back and look at the individual ones. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
The
that's the
concept.
premise behind doing that, yeah, I understand.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think a recommendation that we have blank sheets passed out next time, blank copies of these.
as opposed to email.
Yeah, each commissioner in their box gets
A
Wait.
paper copy.
paper copy,
Okay.
blanks of these, not sending around on the computer. Okay.
Draw something up.
I know, but he had trouble getting it,
I
and so I
couldn't-
resent
I
it in
couldn't
Trouble
Google.
downloading it.
Okay, yeah.
And I
In fact,
think,
killed my computer.
yeah,
Uh,
so I
yeah.
we'll make sure that's on our list of things to do. I think it's a good point, because some people still want the paper. But then I'm going to switch it to a Google Doc, which I think will help a lot of people. Okay, just for reading it and it printing correctly and not altering, because that's been an issue. I think I started this holding on an Apple. Bad idea. Not like my iPad or something. Okay, so moving forward on the evaluation of Michael Curtis, our city manager. Skipping the goals and objectives because we don't have them yet as far as waiting on those after our strategic planning. Do you guys want to just state the subject and then have statements or questions, or Michael, would you want to ask questions or make statements on each of these? Or do we leave the whole thing open for discussion? I mean, I like a little more planning, but I don't want to dictate how you guys are feeling
I don't know,
comfortable.
I'm
suggestion.
open, just doing a time check, we got about 3 minutes, so I'm open.
So should we start with just individual characteristics? Going around the table, if you have anything you'd like to address, positives or negatives that you want. And then Michael, any questions to start, I guess?
I guess the only question I have in the entire evaluation that might be useful is what would you consider an acceptable rating? What's the expectation as far as the numerical ratings go?
Sarah?
That's why I'd like to modify the tool. I'm used to tools that just talk about strengths and not rating them. Rating is very subjective. And so and the questions are kind of subjective. So I'm not much of a number gauge person. I also don't, I think James and I shared the same component last time. I don't believe in the, number 5. I just don't believe that figure exists because people can always do something better. I think exceeding expectations is a pretty good place to be. So it's, again, I think you're gonna ask that question, Mike, and you're gonna get 5 different answers, which is the problem. So I realize we have to have a base to start with, but the concept that somebody is quote unquote perfect in a category, I would never hope that I would get a perfect in anything because I don't think that's humanly possible. There's always something we can do better. So I look at if you're doing above average, exceeding that's a good place to be. But it's kind of the problem with the numerical system. I personally like strengths and weaknesses type of evaluations, which with my current position is what is being used for me.
So Michael, is that enough of an answer and or?
I guess if I was doing a perfectly average job, would I get a 3?
Well,
In
like
my eyes, yes.
Okay, and that's absolutely okay.
But
as long
that's
as
the problem. I think you're gonna get 5 different answers on that.
right. Like so for me, like looking at the first one, 4.42, is that a good job?
it's above average.
Considering
According to
4
your-
exceeds expectations, I would think you can answer that, Mike.
Well, sometimes, but sometimes it's very subjective. So sometimes if you don't get a 5, sometimes people consider, okay, so you're gonna start at a 5 and I'm gonna down. So in some cases, a 4.
That's always gonna be.
Yes. Yeah. So as long as we're all on the same page, and
I
like
start
3
on
needs,
average and go from, that's how I start.
which
Well,
is
the 3
perfectly
is-
okay too.
According to this, so we bantered about this issue when we created this, that it is subjective.
Yes.
We reviewed multiple documents from across the country, and this was pretty typical. We weren't recreating the wheel
Right.
completely. We were trying to find a balance. And so average being 3, this is what we finalized it with versus, okay, 5s or 1 to 3 or, and we can talk about rewriting the document to adjust if people need along the way, but,
I think at this junction, we're at where we're at.
Yeah.
right.
Sure. I just want to make sure that was.
Right,
I don't want to
The
assume that
baseline's
3 is
3, I
average.
guess.
When people are like, ooh, you got a 3.
yeah.
That's not.
So,
Well,
so I'll just say from my perspective, how I attack these things is to me 3 is average. You're doing what you should be doing. Well, you're not doing anything, it's average, and I rate from there. It's interesting that you say the perspective of people will rate a 5 and work backwards. That was the first I've ever heard of attacking it that way. I would never thought about it until you mentioned it. So maybe everybody wants to go around and talk about how their approach to how they used the numbers.
I can say, I just use the instructions. And so, because excellent almost always exceeds the performance standard. Generally exceeds the performance standard, generally meets the performance standard, usually does not meet the performance standard, rarely meets it. So, yeah, if you're meeting the standard, mostly, almost always, but not excelling, then it's a 3. That's how I looked at it. I don't know.
Okay, that's great, because that gives me a really good sense of what the numbers mean.
Right.
And so that's helpful.
Can I clarify one thing for you too, Mike? So, I personally always want whatever I can work on, and again, if I have a really good evaluation, which I had with my previous job all the time, it's kind of meaningless. It's like, really, there's got to be, there are things I need to work on. I know what they are, so why am I not being evaluated on them? Do you value that? Do you
No,
want
absolutely.
that?
Actionable feedback is the best feedback.
More than just a number, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where comments come in.
But I think a thoughtful,
Right.
if everyone just says, well, you're perfect in everything you do, then where's your ambition and goal and strive for what you need to do better next time? That's just not there.
True.
It's not provided.
So, in the individual characteristic category, does anyone have any feedback? Going back to that, with that being clarified now, does anyone have feedback on anything within that?
I think I would just rather summarize I kind of had a recurring thing, so I think I would rather just maybe
Come up with your own summary.
summarize with my own. It's just my opinion.
So, that you want to do that at the end then, Sarah?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then anyone, so I'm assuming no one's saying anything, so we're gonna move on. Professional skills and status. Okay. Michael, do you have any questions on it?
Not so far.
I mean, I'll say positive, and I stated it in my feedback on, in a challenging community, which all are, with diversity and thinking, I appreciate your staying apolitical and neutral in a lot of, I can't imagine you feel it all the time, but at least you do a good job of presenting to people that, you're just trying to find a middle ground to work with all people, and I appreciate that. Anyone else on professional skills?
Yeah, I just like the fact that you're on top of current developments and what's going on. I mean, it really shows it. And the community at large, the people that do pay attention see that as well. So. Do you know?
Mhm. Some of the differences I've seen since I've been on the commission. For instance, we've had trouble establishing a working relationship with the county and the city. And I like the way you jumped right in and started talking with those folks. Right now, we're at a much stronger level than we were 4 or 5 years ago. So, some of those things need to be one-on-one with the right people and who shows how to do it. And there's been several examples that you operate since you've been here. But, okay, I see a little bit of a problem. Not only do you jump in, you jump way in. And let's get her done and let's try and solve it. So that's all good stuff. So, even the downtown thing right now, I'm getting very good comments from the folks that live downtown and work downtown. And they commend the public works. And, there's always the naysayers, you know, it drives people out of business and everything else, and I've had good comments, so we're on the right track there. But I think the chaplain thing, before they linger too long, is exceptional. That's a great trait.
Warren? Anything? And you don't have to comment on each
No,
category. I
I-
don't want everyone to feel pressured.
I'd like to, first of all, I think a specific thing, dealing with the downtown street situation, I think Matt and everybody else involved with that is doing an absolutely fantastic job. And I think that with one or two exceptions, I think most people downtown recognize that big time. And they also recognize that the company that's doing the work, CLP, is really doing a fantastic job as far as moving things along. And as far as the evaluation, I think that we've got a tremendous advance in proactivity and communications. What I would like to see is there's some items like the 20-acre request on the north side. I'd like to see more information on that and things like that. I'm not picking on that one particular thing. The meeting last night, I was asked questions, and fortunately I wasn't here when those decisions were made. But I would like to, and for the most part, I think they are, how decisions were made or based on what is really critical. And I think for the most part, we get that information.
You like to have a little history, a little background, and
On some items, yes. So because, I'll tell you the truth, one of them is the green boxes. I'm getting bombarded with those, believe it or not. The other was how the Main Street one-way decision was made. And I'm not questioning, I mean, you know, it's right, wrong, or different. I just don't have the information, that's all, that I can give the person. Thank you.
so as far as next category then, so moving on to 4, working relationship with elected members of the city commission. Anyone have a positive or a request for improvement? I just have one quick one. I do appreciate that you are innovative in coming up with solutions for things that are brought to you by the commission and the community in general. I think it's thoughtful and it's in other categories as well, but I think that is not always easy to find, so I really appreciate that. Anyone else?
I think we've come a long way on running the meeting, and I want to thank you for all, and the city manager. We just made a few tweaks and made a hell of a difference. Like public comment, where it comes, how it happens, small stuff like that ends up to be very big. So I think we're on the right track. When people ask me how I like my job, I said, I love my job except for some people, but, other than that, I love what I do. So, but we've made some big changes.
which I think is part of that innovation. You have brought some new ideas to us. Anyone else on category 4? Okay, moving on to policy execution, category 5. More the technical aspect. Anything? I appreciate, I guess, on ordinance enforcement, that was a big issue for me personally as a commissioner, and I feel that we've really stepped that up, and I appreciate it, and I know the community does. It's been a long-standing problem, so I think that's probably the main thing of policy that I've noticed. And then I'd like to see some rewriting, but that will take time. Any other feedback on it?
Yeah, the fact that it's gone through the ordinances and that you've read them and know more about them than I do. I mean, it's just, I appreciate that, and the fact that we are starting to see enforcement. People are aware of that as well.
Anyone else? Okay, how about reporting? Reporting section and reporting.
I think that's a fantastic thing. We get the report you send from the city manager, where he's been, who he's sent. And we know that he's out there. That's made a big difference. So I come in there now, but we never had that report before.
I like the detail, like the front loading of the information, which I have complained about in the past, to be honest. And so I appreciate that you have moved towards that. It helps to get that background like Warren's talking about. And it, I think, helps the people as well as us make a better sound decision. So I appreciate sometimes more information is better. Any other feedback on reporting? Community relations? Any feedback? Nothing? Okay, I think I stated what I needed to say in that. Just in my document. Okay, staff and leadership. Anything anyone wants to give feedback on? I think this is one that we're still seeing develop personally, so
Hard to measure that.
it's a little harder to measure. I think I took out an NA on that one and just put in a number at one point, and so it does have to do with not really knowing where it's at this time, but also knowing there's little things going on that you refer to, so.
I thought it was very nice that you put a uniform on and played basketball.
Play basketball, maybe exaggeration.
So small stuff like that, you're out there with the gang, so and I think from what I see with the leadership of different departments, that everybody seems to be on the same page, and that's great.
Anything else? Okay, so last one, in the category is fiscal management. Any feedback from any commissioners, right?
I think that I like the way the budget was presented this year.
The new layout.
Yeah, the new layout's much more works better for me.
Anything else? My only statement would be about the CIP, because we've switched around on how we're managing or looking at it, at the budget and the CIP process in general. I guess we don't really know yet where it's gonna go, so I do like the CIP and just the information that we used to have and how it, again, it was front-loaded with quite a bit of information, and so you got to understand, you know, what was necessary to run the city, and especially when you're a beginning commissioner. So I do miss that part, but I'm not close to new, different things either. So. Anyone else on fiscal management? Warren?
Yeah, it might already exist and I'm not aware of it, but I'd like to see in one place or in one document, I'd like to see everything the city is currently responsible for. In other words, funding the CIP projects, the URA bonding with numbers. I'm very fiscally unaware, so I would like to see that all in one place.
Do you have an answer on?
Well, we can talk about that to get to the specifics of that. Obviously, everything's in the budget.
Oh, yeah, yeah, no, I know.
But if we look at, if there's a different way you'd like that presented, then
Right.
we can figure out what that looks like.
Right, so,
Like a
thank you.
big picture in one small, not in smaller.
Right. I guess then we just need to find what big picture is. So I guess there's a lot of variables, so just figuring out what that looks like, I think we can do.
So that's all 9 categories, but now it's left up to if you want to do a final, I know Sarah, you were waiting towards the end to address your, or give your feedback. And so if anyone else has anything else they want to add, I don't think we necessarily need to go through just those kind of narratives individually, but if someone feels like they have something else to add along the way, of course. So Sarah, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. A couple things. This is again kind of a little bit more procedurally, but I would like to see a little bit more of a 360 evaluation. Meaning, you know, the school district, the board would provide an evaluation to the leadership team and have them fill it out, and that is a good way to get feedback from the leadership team. It remained anonymous, so people didn't feel they didn't have to fill it out, first of all, and it could remain anonymous. It's a tool we could throw out there that is helpful to get feedback from the leadership team in filling out those components of it. And I think also too, the question that each time I've looked at this, I think should be removed is, what have I done as a city commissioner to enhance and or impair your ability to perform your job? And again, that needs to come from you, not us. It's a question directed at you. And again, I would welcome that feedback. And so I think that question should be removed because it's not for us to answer, it's for Mike to answer. And I would appreciate that feedback as well.
That's why I said not much.
And so, you know, I would just think, you know, areas that perhaps I would like to see a little bit of improvement. You know, we used to see quarterly financial reporting. We haven't seen that in a while. We'd like to somehow get that back on the docket again. Jesse used to provide the, you know, where we were budget, expenditures, et cetera, and it was really good just to check on where we were. Also, you know, more updates, and, you know, my evaluation tends to be focused more on what we're really responsible for, which is finance, legal, policy. And that's really what our commission is responsible for besides managing it. So, you know, more regular legal issue updates, especially if the strategy that was presented to us before has changed. I think that's important to know. And instead of hearing about it on the street, I just didn't do it again. So be more up to date on that. I think too, and again, I do appreciate the weekly updates. not sure there's so much we can anymore, but when you have time to get them to you, it's a good snapshot of what's going on, and I really appreciate it, and I enjoy reading them, and I appreciate that. Where I feel maybe it's a little bit lacking are some of our own requests, like, I know I have made a legal request on some zoning issues that I haven't received feedback on. And those are important items because they're affecting, well, this one affects my mother, so it affects my family, but it also affects, you know, it's making me question to make sure is what's happening in our committees, which again, they're responsible for, because there's some as far as, are they following our policies correctly? And so when I don't have an answer, I can't disseminate whether things are correct or wrong, because no answer doesn't tell me either way. Other big tickets like the water reclamation facility, trying to get that information, which we still haven't received, and I'm still getting bombarded by the same people requesting it. And you know, I just don't know what to tell them. And again, for community relations, it's not good when I can't provide them an answer to those questions. So those are just some things I think I would like to see more of a response to our, not just you providing what you're doing, but providing a report on the request that we I think too a little bit in communicating with constituents and some of my own feedback is a little resistance in constructive criticism or challenges. I, as a commissioner, feel comfortable to talk to you about that individually. I do have some constituents that you know, like the rejection of the city, but have mentioned or tried to make meetings and tried to discuss the scenario or make a suggestion. It wasn't well received. Hearsay otherwise, I'm just sharing it because it wasn't just us. So, also in the budget process, to see, again, you all know my opinions, but when I also hear from my constituency, which is often where I get my opinions, their revenue source doesn't increase every year with an automatic raise. But when their taxes go up and their health insurance goes up, they have to budget and figure out how to make it work without an additional revenue. And they, as myself, would like to see the city make more an effort in that regards as well. Don't automatically assume we can just raise taxes to cover the problem. You know, maybe there's more of a cost sharing health insurance with employees. Maybe we don't have to have a automatic 2% in the contracts when we negotiate. What things can we look at that don't automatically mean increasing revenue to the taxpayer when those folks themselves are trying to make do without any increase? So I just share that because that's a context. But overall, I like the, you know, there's a lot of issues that are being addressed and trying to be solutioned and work together to find resolution. That's
Can we have a mic so we can hear this?
large undertaking.
Sarah, will you pull your mic?
Well, it's kind of irrelevant to get the end of the conversation. We've been at this for an hour now, but you know, I appreciate that trajectory of the city. Sometimes I think some things may be a little overzealous. Perhaps we should take a deep breath and step back and make sure, yes, we are making a decision, but are we making the right decision? I sometimes feel a little bit rushed, but you know, overall, you know, I think we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate the efforts put forth by you and what you're doing to help the staff in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other feedback from the commissioners before? Well, Mike, do you have any questions or things that you'd like answered before we?
I appreciate the feedback. I think it's format's good. It gives me, especially the, I guess if you're going to focus on anything, focus on the comments because that's the most useful to me. I love the numbers, but the comments is where I get the real meat of what can be changed. I guess the only question would be, when would you like to do the the contract negotiation piece of it.
Put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, should we put it on?
Been over a year or so.
Whatever works
You
for you
guys
guys.
okay with that, putting it on the agenda for the next meeting? Okay. So we'll negotiate during that time.
And should we, do a special or wait? I guess that's not a value. I mean, I'm asking, does that need to be part of the agenda? Do we need it separate? I'm just asking.
I don't think it has to be separate. To me, however you want to do it. You can do a special meeting if you want.
You can request it to be closed or.
We can include it with the budget if you want. It could be rolled into the budget discussions, because obviously it's a budget time. It just depends on how you want to work it.
I think separate. I mean, it should be addressed. as a
Yeah.
Separate.
So you mean a special meeting, separate issue or an?
No, I don't think it
action
should be
item?
talked about during the budget.
Okay.
Yeah,
It should be
leave that
separate
alone,
discussion. But I don't think it needs to be a special meeting.
So the last, so we don't need to start, yeah, we'll put it on the agenda, we won't have it like at 6 o'clock to discuss before the meeting, okay? Right?
As long as Mike's okay.
However you want to do it.
Anything else, Mike, before? So in the past, one last thing is, we have always, and again, you know, it's a new commission, it's a new day. Yeah, put out a motion to continue employment or not. Okay, I don't know if that is something that we continue to do. Huh?
It's a new one.
Well, that was something that was done before. So after the evaluation, it was put to a motion to accept. Or we could do that during the negotiations as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think in the future, the evaluation, renewal contract, negotiation contract should probably be all in one shot. But again, information in advance, so we're
Right.
well aware and can analyze it. So
Exactly.
I have no problem extending the contract today, help my sleep better, and then deal with the negotiations at the next meeting. Or we, works for me. Do we have on the agenda, we're taking action?
It's a special meeting, so you can take action if you want, but it's up to you. Like some. It makes me.
Let's just do it.
Yeah, that's good. I make a motion to extend Mr. Charges' employment for another year. It is a year-to-year, yeah. contract.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hope,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4?
Commissioner Freeman. 4. Commissioner Sandberg.
4.
Commissioner Mason.
Motion passes. Now, this meeting, or a special meeting of the Livingston City Commission is closed at, we usually have your 6:30. Another meeting.
We'll take a short-
Can we take a little
5
short,
minutes.
short recess?
Or not even recess.
We can get organized. Okay, copies. So I have, I use orange, yellow, and red.
And I brought yours back.
Okay, or I can do them on.
Oh, wait, you need it signed, so. I'll get this.
Okay.
I don't need
as I talked with my secretary, who said, yeah, we can. They were gonna look oh, they pay it, so they did. Anyway, at least they
What a mess.
It'll look nice.
Okay.
I'm not gonna leave it like that.
Okay.
so public comments tonight on the city.
I need a lot of tea.
Schedule. That's what we're going to be.
We've done through it.
Yeah.
Next time.
There is a plan.
We are not on.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's here, and we normally have to get on before. Normally, they just. They
Let's say a
don't
month,
make.
they're saying 3 weeks.
You can, or you can actually. We've already done it twice. Hi, Jay. How's it going? All right. We were supposed to be in a schedule because it's coming. So we can get that we could be on schedule for public comments next time.
One.
We all need it.
I know, and then you just. Somebody else tried
Yeah.
I think my show is who wants to go first?
So I had to go down a lot I'm like, I
Yeah, I do.
I go
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So I figured out last week. And they sold us. Yes. So I can't go over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a dress. Nice to see you at the meeting, Joe. Y'all say. Yeah. Not that I expect to.
Right.
This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Holden,
Yes,
Commissioner Schwartz,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman,
Here.
Commissioner Sandberg,
Present.
Commissioner Mayhew.
Here.
now we will have a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are a few additions to our agenda tonight. We have one additional proclamation, a Youth Week proclamation, and also in action items, we have a third discuss, approve, deny. The downtown one-way or options for parking and various issues related to downtown. It is an addendum, so that means that we will discuss that issue during that time versus during public comment, because it is an agenda item. So tonight we have, commissioners, we have 6 consent items. I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry, let me start that over. We have switched public comment, I'm used to the other. So We are open for public comment. Please come to the podium or sign in. State your name and address at the podium.
For the taller ones. Patricia Grable, 204 East Calendar. I would like to, again, ask that we have a coalition of downtown groups that would like to be part of a scheduled public comment at the next city commission meeting. I know we asked that at the last city commission meeting and we were to be scheduled for tonight and it didn't happen. So we would like to ask to be able to petition our representatives directly with a scheduled public comment. Next week is a coalition of downtown building owners, Park County Environmental Council, Future West, businesses, active cities, and so forth. There's a coalition of people who would like to make that scheduled public comment and have the Dan Burton study and comments that we have developed in the city commissioner's packet if possible.
So Patricia, that it's related to the downtown parking and, or what? So
Well,
we're
this is a
clear.
different issue. This is
Okay.
a scheduled public comment issue.
Yes, so what is the basis, just so we can make sure we state it correctly on the agenda? And
Well, we would like to be able to petition our representatives directly, rather than
on what issue? Just in a
we would
nutshell.
like to present directly the Dan Burton study and the comments we've developed on the Dan Burton study directly to our representatives, rather than have it go somehow filtered any other way. Just like to be able to have it in your packet, present to you as a scheduled public comment.
Okay, so just putting it in as present the Dan Burton study and other public feedback and comments related to that study
At the next meeting, if we could.
at the next meeting.
Uh-huh.
All right,
Rather than, as it is, making comments on the addendum tonight. I mean, we'll make comments on the addendum, obviously, but this is a different issue.
thank you.
And can other people just make comments? Some came early so that they could, it was their understanding they could make public comments.
They can during that agenda item. Yes,
Besides the
was-
agenda item tonight.
Yeah, see, we didn't know about it, so there was nothing published publicly so that we would know about it. We had understood that there would be a scheduled public comment tonight. It didn't happen. So the people that are here to speak as public comments as opposed to respond to an addendum that they've never seen. You see what I'm saying?
True. Jay, can you give us your feedback on that, because there
I
was,
think it's a good idea. I think they'll cover everything. Why don't we just move that action item up to after consent items?
Oh, that'd be great.
Yes.
If you could.
good idea.
Thank you.
We're still open for public comment. Do we have any other public comment on any issues, community issues or thoughts? Not on the agenda.
Right, I just have a clarifying question for you all concerning this. So if you're, and I'm calling 209 South High Street Congress. You're gonna, so action item means you're gonna decide whether it's one way versus two way tonight. No. You're just gonna discuss it.
Okay, discuss, approve, deny. It's under an action item, so it's always open as to discuss, approve, deny.
So
We could take action, it depends how the conversation
Yes.
goes.
We don't know yet that. It's conversation.
Right, so I'm just thinking about just like process of, so it's open for discussion and then action depending on that discussion. Thank you.
Any other public comment or questions?
Jay Keeper, 325 South Main. 3 weeks, when we first started this, the early public comment, I came a little bit late. And the chairman of the commission chatted with me after the meeting regarding the sign that was presented before the commission 3 years ago by Janet Prescott. And the chairman of the commission asked me the question, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, I was fortunate to contact Janet Prescott, and she said the Montana Department of Transportation pays for it. Then I called somebody at the Chamber of Commerce, and they said that, well, this will take 10 years. And I said, it takes 10 years to basically get the nuts and bolts for the United States Census. It can't take that long for signage. And I would just like you to sort of work with the chamber as far as making things happen. I see that things are going on with the streets, but I think that we need to be a little bit more, have a little bit more momentum in our decision making. Thank you.
So Michael, could you make note on the signage issue? And I know we've talked about it a long time past, for years, but it is something that has been discussed in our community, and I think it, it should go away just because we kind of forgot. Yes. Wayfinding,
Well,
yeah.
it's not that, it's directing. The proposal was made to make the east exit, the
primary for the city center.
for the city center, as opposed to the interchange on Parkgate.
And yeah, they'd add signage on the east end, is that city center is this direction, as well as having it on the west and not just the central. I think it's on the west now and the central, but.
I have to double check, but I think the DOT only allows it on one.
Mm-hmm.
The regulations are you can only have city center on one exit.
If we could.
Yeah, I
But was that
remember the
one
conversation,
time?
but it was 3 years ago.
Because there's
Yes,
3 or
it's
4
been-
signage issues, so.
Yeah.
Which is my question. Should we clarify that we're discussing the correct signage issue and perhaps have the person that made the presentation represent instead of,
We gotta find it,
Yeah.
yeah.
We have to find
Right
that
out.
information out. Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
have
then-
some here.
As a commission, we can approve to put it back on the agenda to discuss it, but I think we need to before we send Mike down that path, we need to understand which one we're discussing.
Exactly.
Do we need clarification from Jay on that?
What? I know what Jay's talking about.
I just want to make sure I'm clearly understanding which signage. We've had probably 4 different
Well,
signage.
Well, all I know is that there was sort of a machine that showed on the screen on their different art designs that have already been approved by the Montana Department of Transportation. So it's like, welcome to Kalispell, welcome to Lewistown, and there's a cowboy hat on one, mountain range on the other, and it just sort of, the city had it, was given it by Janet Prescott 3 years ago, and what they did with that, I don't know. I can call Janet Prescott and see if she still has it in her file, but why something like that would not be retained by the city is beyond me.
If I may, yes. If I understand, she made a presentation, was going to be coming back, and I think if my recollection is correct, we never did get that follow-up presentation is what happened. So I think, so it's not as if we lost something. I think there was a second, there were some questions that were presented and they were going to come back with a second presentation, and I don't believe we actually ever got that. And then, Janet sold her business, et cetera. So I think if it's something that the commission wants to look at, I'm not sure who would be in charge of that now, because is Janet still in the community?
No,
Yeah.
she's a Galvin County.
So again, I'm not sure she actually provided us anything with that, besides just her initial presentation.
Well, I guess the thing that sort of, frustrated me was to say, well, you know, with the Montana Department of Transportation, it takes 10 years. And I thought, come on, it takes 10 years to formulate a census. It can't take that long for signs to go up. And I thought, enough of this, I'm going to commission tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great.
Sorry if I was.
No, I think
just
that
trying
helped.
to get
Clarification.
I was thinking something else.
Mike, if you could just see what information you have on the signage, if there's anything we're missing that.
It's way fine.
We take a couple meetings and then maybe the second one go over all the signage issues. And maybe we can start determining which ones
Okay.
are still valid.
Yes.
Options that we're not talking
Madam
about.
Chairman,
Thank you.
may I clarify something? Because I work with Janet on it.
Come up to the podium, Patricia. Related to the signs.
Yes. Yeah, and you, that, a bit. The CBB and the downtown building owners with Janet, I work with Janet on wayfinding signage is what he's referring to. And because we're a CBB, we qualify for money for wayfinding signage. It's quite wonderful. It takes us from, it tells where the depot center, it tells where the civic center is, it tells, it has all kinds of details. And we can provide the city manager with copies of that, because Janet had also done that. We negotiated two different things. We negotiated signage on the east end of town with the then acting city manager, and we talked about wayfinding signage with Janet. And we developed an initial plan for wayfinding signage with the chamber. So that has been in the works for some time. So we would love to work with the city manager and continue that effort and get that done soon, because there's funding for it already through the CBB. And then in addition, the third side, of course, we have a chamber director who's worked really hard at 4 signs, welcome to Livingston signs. So there's really 3 different signage that we brought before the chamber, the commission. So if you want to sit there.
Leslie Final, Chamber CBB. So like she said, the city signage, the meeting that we had last year that was in this room, there were 2 separate scenarios for the signage, and the MDT has particular signage for the freeway. But when it comes to the wayfinding signage within our community, that is something that is an ongoing process. I've asked for groups to submit the signs that they would like to see. Then we will have an initial meeting to sit down. There are 2 grants with the state Office of Tourism that I have available to me through the CBB, but we have to have a clear and concise plan and all of the signage within our city that we are looking at, opposite of the ones that are on the interstate and the highway itself. They've already actually put up a few along the interstate and highway, but the rest of them are going to be up to this new plan. Nothing works overnight. And on that note, on that MDT signage letter, I still do not have a copy of that. I'm hoping that I can get a copy of that. Okay. So, thank you.
Oh, that's good.
Any other public comments?
Don Bladdock, 229 South Yellowstone. I know later on there's going to be discussion about Main Street, one-way, two-way, and parking. And I think it's going to be specific to that area. But I'd like to broaden that discussion of a citywide parking issue. I think we all would admit there's a citywide parking issue. And I would go as far to say that the root cause of it has been the city itself. For decades, from what I can determine, they have illegally granted variances to R2 zoning. So you'll have lots with, I know a lot that has 7 living units on it. There's one right up the street from me that has 5 living units on it. The city allowed that to happen, a lot of times without a quorum. So there's the first, I think, a root cause of the problem. The second is an ordinance about trailers, motorhomes, you name it, parked on the street. They take up an enormous amount of space, and I think they're a blight on the community. I mean, you've got trailers that don't move for, I got one right by me. I don't think it's moved in 2 years. The ordinance is not being enforced. It's the city's job to enforce those ordinances, and I think that would alleviate some of the parking issues. I want to go, has anyone looked on the city's website? No, I just want to say, if we could just get the ordinances enforced, I think that would help fix the problem. On the city's website, does anybody know what the #1 duty listed for the city manager is? Mr. Carter?
It's enforcing ordinance.
Exactly. I don't see him being enforced. We had discussions not too long ago. We're going to change street sweeping ordinance. We're going to ticket. Did anybody see a ticket get written? I know I did on my street, and there were violators. So my neighbors, I didn't see any tickets. Enforce the ordinance. How do we get the ordinances enforced?
I can answer that question.
Yes, please.
I need about $80,000 to $90,000. No, that's not true. If you follow the street sweeper around, it's 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So you're talking overtime. It's probably a couple $100,000 if you want to enforce every ordinance all the time.
I don't think that has to be done. You made a comment before. You just start enforcing it, people will take note. No one takes notes. You're like, hey, didn't get enforced. I'm not going to move. But I get what you're saying. So why was a code enforcement person let go, a police officer hired saying that will be kind of his role? You had a staff position to do it. Put them to use. Instead of now having a police officer, which kind of does it. I don't know, because like I said, I haven't seen it happen.
Actually, tickets have gone up about 80% in the last 3 months since we had the officers start to do it. It's not kind of his job. It actually is a additional duty. It's a job title that he's going to do full-time. That's his job. We actually are having a meeting in the next couple of weeks to better define that because we've changed the role. So we're going to sit down with all the different departments and say, okay, what about this situation? What about this situation? But it's still just one guy. It's still just one person.
Okay, so when can we expect to see some kind of action?
Well, you just did.
Well, again, I personally reported some. They're still there. So no action. And now what I've seen is some that have the orange stickers on them, they moved them up onto the boulevard. I kid you not. There are trailers that now had an orange sticker on them. People just put them on the boulevard. That's no joke. How does that look to the city?
I bet you there's not code on that.
I'm sure it's not. That's why they did it. It's not parked on the street.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? In the future, though, I will address ordinances in my commissioner comments. It's on my list. So any other public comment? Okay. Tonight we have 6 consent items. Are there any consent items that commissioners would like to pull for discussion?
So I would like to draw your attention to consent item C. And this is how you will see this in the future. This is one of the things we talked about probably 6 months ago was the monthly financial report from the city court, which I'm not sure any of you have ever seen before. The new judge has done an excellent job of working with the finance department and figuring out the format of this report, working with Jay. So you actually get to see a breakdown month by month of tickets, disposed and dismissed cases, the surcharges that are going to the different programs, such as the victim and witness surcharge. That money gets transferred to the county and goes towards victims and witnesses. So you can see a breakdown, and you can see the increase in the totals of enforcement there. If you notice, I think the first month, which is January in this report, it was about $7,000. Went up to $10,000 in February and almost $13,000 in March. So you can see a pretty good increase in, I think, just in the efficiency that the courts and the LPD and everyone else have been working together to get to. So that's a significant effect, and it's a really great product. And I'd just like to thank the judge publicly. She's not here, but I'd like to thank her for helping institute that, because that's a great improvement to the city court process. process.
Any commissioners, want to hold any consent items? That's all. Do I have a motion from the commission?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I make a motion, we pass consent items A, B, C, D, E, F.
I have a motion by Friedman. Do you have a second?
I don't- Warren got it.
Okay. Motion by Friedman, second by Maybe. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Copeland,
Yes?
Commissioner Schwartz,
Four.
Commissioner Friedman,
Four.
Commissioner Sanford. Four. Commissioner Maybe.
Yes.
Motion passes. So tonight we're moving action item C to the front of our work, our business. So action item C,
Actually, mine,
C
It's
is
the-
it is,
the addendum.
yeah,
Let me
wasn't.
discuss Main Street traffic plan. Mr. Cousins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So included in the addendum is both the blue zone traffic study as well as the original decision. And Commissioner, maybe that may be something you can look back on as far as the process and how the decision was made. So it's the original decision brief that was given the night the decision was made. There's a lot of detail in this, but I think I'd like to go over it philosophically more than into the actual details of it. Obviously, the current status is the commission voted to change Main Street into a one-way from Park to Clark. The main reasons for improved traffic flow and additional parking spaces. This additional traffic study was added recently by the community group that Tricia was talking about. The constraints that we're under right now is the main one, and what drove the original decision was whether or not to include the curb extensions in the construction project. When that was decided against, that really freed up most of the decision-making space. There's nothing that's driving an important decision on that. If we were going to institute any change to the Main Street, because it is an urban route, that would have to go through the Transportation Commission of MDT. If we want to include that in the end of the construction project, their meeting is in June. That's the last one before the construction project will be done. Hopefully, we don't want them to still be going during their, I think it's an August meeting, August 21st. So we're hoping they're done before the August meeting of the Transportation Commission. And so agenda items would have to be into them by 18 May. So that'd be 3 days.
I just want clarification on that, the
Sure.
implementation. So when we brought this in, is it the implementation, just I just want to clarify, of their proposed plan? Okay, so when we discussed this as a commission, we specifically asked you what were the time constraints, when would we have to make the decision if we wanted to reroute it back to a two-way? And basically we were told it's just paint, it could be August. So now,
The decision could be at any time, but the only question is whether or not it's included in this contract. And what I'll get to is I don't think there's any reason to include it in this contract.
include what in this contract?
Any changes to the painting.
Okay, so I'm confused, so.
Mike, do you want to continue with this plan just in detail? So then maybe some request.
Well, I'm trying to understand the constraints because, correct me if I'm wrong with my rest of my commissioners. Do you not remember that we were told we could make the decision at any time, it's just painting differently?
Well, the way I'm reading it, yeah,
I'm not talking about how we're reading, I'm talking about what was discussed.
Yes,
I
and
know,
that's still true.
That's still true.
Yes.
but
So what's this that's making it different?
It's not making it different. It's just the timing of when that painting would be done.
And so it's the timing of when the painting would be done.
Yes.
This would put the painting at what point?
What would put the
Your constraints
If
paragraph.
this would make it so it was absolutely sure we could add it into the end of the construction contract.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, when we discussed this 2 weeks ago, it was never told to us that we would need MDT approval to change with the paint. So why are we just hearing about that now?
No, we actually talked about that when we approved it one way the very original time.
I know, but I'm talking about to change it, to keep it as a two-way. We were told that decision could be made at any time, so, but now we're here saying that we have to get approval from MDT.
We've always had to get approval from MDT, even for the one-way. If we don't make any changes to it, if we accept it as it was before construction started, we don't have to talk to MDT.
So if we keep it as a two-way, there's no MDT discussion.
If we keep it exactly like it was,
With
What does that
parallel
mean?
parking.
with the same lane widths, the same parking configuration,
As we have currently?
as what, yes, before the construction began, yes,
Okay, that's my clarification.
yes,
So if we keep it the way it was pre-construction, there's no MDT.
that's correct, because they've already approved that that's the current configuration.
So as far as turning it into a one-way, we still need MDT approval.
Yes, and that's why we were planning to go to the next
Okay.
meeting.
Can I clarify? So I feel like we need more information. So can you continue
I
before we
absolutely can.
open it to questions? And I think your questions are great, Sarah. I think,
I was
it will
just
help to clarify, but I
understanding
feel like
what that paragraph meant.
Sure, and so the constraint is only to include it in the current contract, which I don't think is an important constraint. That's just there for information. There's no need to tie it to the construction contract. We can retain it at any time. We can make the decision at any time, which actually is the recommendation I'm going to get to. So we talked about, just for current background, we talked about when we did this look at Main Street, we looked at Main Street specifically. It was not looking at a comprehensive plan for downtown. It's not looking at a comprehensive plan for Park Street or anything. It was Main Street specific. And it was driven by the question of curb extensions and whether they needed to be included in the construction. So once that was done, the new traffic study is a more comprehensive look. It doesn't look at just Main Street. It looks at some of the surrounding streets. It doesn't look at the entire downtown area, and I don't think it really looks at Park Street. But it's a more comprehensive look. That's an absolutely valid focus that we could take. We could switch to a more comprehensive focus. And I think that's probably, because of the way we went with the curb extensions, I think that's probably a wise way to go about it, is to possibly slow down the process and take some time to look at all the options. For that, as far as the options go, I think the priorities that when we look at the Main Street and the downtown area in general, the four priorities that most people talk about when we talk about this project are traffic flow, parking, pedestrian/bicycle safety, and historic authenticity. I think those are the four main priorities that we're going to talk about. If we're going to make a decision on this type of project, I think we need to first sit down and talk about those four priorities and where they rank. What is our number one priority? Is it traffic flow? Is it parking? Is it historic authenticity? Is it pedestrian safety? I don't think we've done a comprehensive look and ranked those priorities against each other and said, hey, you have to make a decision, which priority takes precedence? So I would suggest that we do that first, that we sit down and talk through that and say, hey, what are our actual priorities for the downtown traffic flow? Let's see what we can do with that. If we're going to take a more comprehensive look at this, I provided a list of about 25 individual actions that we could take, and they are wide-ranging. I'm certainly not recommending all 25. Those are just possibilities that exist. We could go with the current configuration. We could go with a one-way on Main Street with diagonal parking on both sides. We could go a two-way Main Street with back and diagonal parking and standard diagonal parking. We could add one-ways to Callender and Clark to add diagonal parking and parallel parking on those streets. We could do that for the entirety from H Park. We could do that for a subset of that travel. We could do two-way non-standard lanes on Callender and Park, so we'd have shorter than or narrower than recommended lanes in those areas. But we don't have on those, and Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think either one of those are currently listed on the urban routes, right? No. Callender and Clark, so neither one of those are urban routes. We have more flexibility there than we do on Main Street, where we pretty much need to meet the standards because it is an urban route and DOT sets those standards. We could leave all the streets as they are and try to solve the problem with city-owned parking lots. We could do a specific parking lot for residents and employees of downtown businesses. We could do a specific parking lot that's a public parking lot. That parking lot could be free. That parking lot could be paid. We could do a private parking solution. We could try and recruit someone to come in and make their own solution. We could do a private-public partnership parking solution. We could add a stoplight at Second and Park. We could add turn lanes to Park Street. We could add parking meters downtown, whether those are kiosks on the corners or individual meters. At this point, I would probably say kiosks on the corners would be a better idea. We could add in the curb extensions. One thing we did after the decision to go one way is there seemed to be, I would say there wasn't a clear consensus on curb extensions. There seemed to be a lot for and a lot against. So we redesigned the streets to actually accommodate curb extensions later on if they wanted to be added in. For a marginal amount, we were able to redesign the storm drainage so that you could add curb extensions at any point without redoing the storm drainage. So that's another option we have that we didn't have before. And then bicycle lanes. It's not even a comprehensive list. That is a list of possible actions we could take if we are looking at this as a comprehensive downtown parking, traffic flow, pedestrian solution. The downside of that is obviously if we are going to analyze all of that, it's going to be a much longer time frame for implementation. This is not something we're going to do this summer. I would say at a minimum, that's a year-long process. It may require a city manager appointed board of citizens to run multiple public meetings through the year or 2 years or whatever it takes to get this solution correct. But the solutions we've come up with now allow us to continue with construction, to continue with the actual rehabilitation of the streets and the sidewalks and the sewer and the water and the storm drainage without limiting our possibilities or our options as we go forward. So my recommendation would be to take this new study, take the old study, take this list of possible actions and really take the time to go through it with both the community and the commission to look at all the options, figure out the cost, figure out the funding, figure out, what are our priorities for downtown? Those 4 priorities, what are they? And then craft a solution based on those priorities. I think that is my guess is that would be, the perfect implementation time would probably be when we completed the next block of Main. Then we could do it as a full unit on Main Street and figure out what the overall solution is. That would make the most sense for as far as implementation. It would give us a lot of time to go through all the options. I think it's a methodical, longer term process, which we now have the ability to do because we figured out how to not limit ourselves as we went forward with the construction. So that is why Patricia didn't get scheduled for public comment tonight, because I think I'd rather have her in multiple public comments, in multiple forums over multiple months to really come up with a solution that I think the community will appreciate, or at least get as close to consensus as we possibly can on this issue, because obviously Main Street affects everyone, whether it's the businesses that operate there or the citizens that like to shop there or the tourists that come visit. So that would be my recommendation to the commission, is to take some time to really go through it.
So is that recommendation then to,
Sarah can
oh, sorry,
open, okay, so should we start with commissioner comments then, or community comments on the issue?
I was
Sarah,
just
would you-
doing clarification.
Go ahead.
So the recommendation, if I understand correctly from the administration then, is to continue with our construction this summer, but when it's done, we're still gonna have a 2-way. It's gonna look just like it did before, except we're gonna have new sewer and water lines and new pavement and sidewalks. Take a more collaborative community approach on these items listed and perhaps some others to determine what does the overall design encompass and we want it to look like in the future. Hopefully, perhaps having consensus before we start again next summer.
Yes, or even if it takes a couple of years, I think that's the right way to do it. I'd rather take a couple of years and get the right solution than push something through that people don't like and don't appreciate. So I think because we have the option to continue with the rehab and make sure the streets and the sidewalks are in good shape and accommodating for tourists and are safe for the people out there walking, I think we can take more time with the decision itself on what the future traffic configuration looks like, and we can widen the scope to more than just Main Street and look at the entire downtown area. And I'm not looking for a quick solution. I'm looking for something that will inform our projects for the next 5 to 10 years.
Sounds perfect to me.
Okay, so commission, do you want to open up for public comment at this time, or would you like to ask any questions or clarifications first?
I'd like to talk.
You ready to
Commission, yeah,
talk first?
yeah,
Okay,
that's okay. The one thing I've always wanted, and having been to numerous conferences on active transportation and building active communities initiative, which we just hosted last week, is the curb extensions. I know we can always put them in after the fact, but now it's the optimum time to do it cost-wise, because we're only looking at concrete. Whereas if we, revisit that, down the road, we're gonna start construction again. Albeit, perhaps minimal. Am I on the right track there, Michael? Yeah. So, to me, yeah, I think I would like to, certainly open this up, to the revisit, one way versus, two-way traffic. And I'm a big fan of back-end parking myself. I'm the diagonal. I'm very progressive on this, and I want to be. But my main thing is it's as construction is going on, when we start forming up our curb and gutter, that would be time really to do the curb extensions. And I believe we had a cost of what, 100,000, whatever concrete cost, or it was somewhere in that ballpark. And unfortunately, I don't have numbers on what it would be down the road. But I'm sure we could come up with that. So that's my only concern right now with what's going on. And that I yield.
Other commissioner comments or questions?
So you've been supporting the recommendation of the city manager or not?
Oh, yes. With
But
the
you
exception,
want-
I would like to see curb extension for them now rather than later.
Okay.
Just,
So that's-
because that doesn't affect whether it's one way or two way.
No,
Because there's gonna
except
be,
though
curb extensions are
it,
what they are.
it falls into those 4 components that he was discussing now, as far as getting feedback of traffic flow, parking, historic authenticity, et cetera. So it is one of those hot topics that I think can
But
hang us up.
that's why I'm bringing up the cost
Yeah.
of it. That's in the reality of that. We don't do it now, it's not gonna get done.
Well, I don't think that's true.
Well, it's just my opinion.
Okay, I
Maureen?
just wanted to, yeah, so,
The cost, is that per intersection or is that total?
It was-
What was the total cost, Shannon? You were on top of your head, was it 225 for all 6 intersections?
Not quite that much. It's about 150, but now that we have actually cost estimates through COP for a curb and gutter, sidewalk, square footage, we can give you an accurate cost.
Better, yeah.
It depends if you had the first block of main, which obviously isn't part of this construction project.
And you probably let that go. I tried.
And I think the overall idea of keeping it the way it is now, and then looking at the overall parking situation for whatever, 2 or 3 years, makes a whole lot of sense.
Sarah?
just back on the curb extensions though, I think we didn't budget for them, so they're not in this, and it wasn't part of the contract. And we've already incurred an additional couple $100,000 due to some other issues. And I think fiscally, to add that in for this year is, I'm not sure how we would do that financially, because we were already struggling to find how we were paying for the concrete issue that arose. So it's just another component to think about is, how do we pay for that when we're already 20% over budget on that?
Well, I think they are far enough along at this point, it's probably hard to get into this construction. I don't think we can get into this project. Maybe more looking forward to the third block of Maine is really the first opportunity we would have.
So I think that's important as we have this debate, because we don't want to have discussion on items that can't be fixed currently. That's You know, so that's important to know that it probably can't get done this year.
Any other comments from the commission? So I appreciate looking at this issue as a big picture kind of approach, because I think there are still concerns for parking. It is probably the one thing I hear about the most as far as downtown is concerned. We also have obviously the issue of historic preservation, which tends to be, it's like the two sides, like the Republicans and Democrats are, you know, battling over one issue, and I think they're both valid. It's an issue that is valid to each group, and you know, I appreciate that we're looking big picture, because I always want to have that future looked at versus just the current moment. And so having, like you said, 10 years down the road is how we should always look at what we're doing. It's not just about the moment. So I appreciate this. I actually look forward to working with the community in trying to come up with a more comprehensive plan. So I like this idea. I appreciate it. Any other commission comments before we open it up? Warren?
Just one last one. There's also such a thing as a temporary curb extension, which could be used during like a high traffic summer season or tourist season, and then could be removed during the winter, which would make snow plowing a whole lot easier. It can be done with the extensions, but it'd be a lot easier without them. So that way, during the season of most possible injury, it would be implemented. It would be covered. So that's a possibility too.
You add that to your list of options.
I will. And if I might just add that I'm glad you were paying attention in class last week.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it or open into public comment. Please come to the podium, sign in, and state your name.
Good evening. Everyone on this side, 15 Bartlett Jump Road. Well, thank you for reconsidering this, and I think you look at the lens exactly what we've been looking at. We've been looking at some category of issue: safety, historical preservation, traffic, and parking. So exactly the mission, and for all of this issue, without looking at current literature and the study what we have presented, and which you mentioned in the opening, that a two-way street seemed the better solution until we find a holistic approach, which might take some time. One thing to consider that for a small town, traffic flow is not necessarily the only measure we look at, but actually is how you reach point A to point B, which is not necessarily traffic flow, not necessarily how many cars run in the street per minute, which is what engineers tend to measure, but how easily can you reach the point of destination. And two-way street is a much better solution for small town centers. That's one of the reasons why we got this report that we included in the presentation will be very useful. So we're very glad that we're going back at least temporarily to this two-way street until this more comprehensive study is looked at, and we're very happy to participate. Thank you very much.
I'm Lindy Gibson, and I'm at 111 North Yellowstone, and I'd like to ask that you reconsider leaving Main Street as a two-way, something that I think needs to be considered. Absolutely, I think the parking is an issue downtown. If we can have other solutions besides making a one-way, I think that's the way to go. Also, the aesthetic, historic value is important, but I know that from downtown businesses that the parking is the #1 concern out of the list that was presented. Something I would like the commission to consider is that 3 of our 5 public schools are at the end of Main Street. And when school is dismissed, It won't affect the walking traffic, but the kids with bikes, as well as the students, faculty, and parents with vehicles, I feel that we need to continue giving them access all the way up Main Street. Two of our youth centers are on Main. One is by Crystal's Furniture Store, and then the other one is just off of Main on Lewis. And I think that we need to bear in mind the younger population as far as leaving a two-way. We don't want to create any safety issues by making it a one-way, as well as when the tourists come. We all have experienced the crunch of our traffic tripling, and we want to be good examples of just leaving it the way it was rather than creating a one-way for people that have come here before and they just expect it to be two-lane and it's not. And I know I've heard we can try the one-way and then if it doesn't work, go back to it. But I think our traffic situation with Livingston growing as it is already stressful enough, and we all have to take a deep breath, practice patience, courtesy, and I would hope, I just really appeal to the commission to leave it as a two-way. I just sense that if we switch to a one-way, whether it's permanent or temporary, we're just asking for a slow train wreck. So please consider leaving it that way and looking at alternatives to relieve the parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Crystal Cipriani, 615 Bluebird Lane. Sorry, I own Livingston Home Outfitters on Main, and really what I thank you so much for the opportunity to reconsider and take this a bigger holistic solution that's going to mean a lot to at least us to have a say and our concerns addressed. But what I want to bring, other than what's already been said, is regardless of our answer solution to this problem, it will continue to be a problem if we don't manage parking, period. Like, there has to be a parking management. That is our issue more than anything. There's actually a lot of parking. It's just, managing it and keeping it, timed and getting people held accountable for staying in their spots and whatever. So I truly believe we have a lot of parking. We can add more parking. There's solutions that can be phased in as we grow as a community, but without, taking into account the bigger root issue of managing that, we're going to continue to have those problems. So, and I'll just reiterate, I'm worried about the kids after school more than going to school, having to go against traffic, getting to those after school centers and the Pickle Barrel, which we know they all like to go to. And then, so those were my big ones. I wrote them on my phone because I wasn't prepared tonight. I didn't think we were going to be on the agenda. Oh, and the other big one was just what it's going to cause on 2nd Street at the depot in the Murray. It's already really hard to turn left there onto Park, and without a light, I would like to see a light there because it's pretty. It's the depot in the Murray. That's going to continue to be worse. And then the B Street, trying to turn left there is already pretty bad too, and people are coming up. So I love the thought of rethinking all of that and making sure we make the right decisions. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Crystal. Anyone else?
Thank you. Patricia Grable, 204 East Calendar. Appreciate the opportunity to provide the Dan Burden study next city commission meeting. Now, this will cost the city nothing. It won't, it's just where you put the stripes now. So we could, and we made arrangements for Dan Burden to be here tonight. By phone, we will make arrangements for him to be here at the next city commission meeting so he can answer questions regarding this study. This study answers our questions. It does everything that the city manager is talking about, but it does it now, and it doesn't cost the city anything. in the Dan Bergen study, as you will see next week, he proposes, and in terms of MDOT, he again will be able to answer the commissioner's questions on this. But Whitefish is about 10 inches short of standard in their Main Street, and they have diagonal parking going all the way down Main. And of course, in the study, he talks about removing the center line, and there are details of this study. So if we were to implement this study at the end of the construction season, he doesn't talk about parking lots. He asks that we consider hiring a parking lot expert and deal with that issue as a separate issue. This is just where we put the stripes. And what happens with implementing this study right away is that it enhances the business in our downtown while we go through this entire decision-making process. It is something the businesses are completely on board with. Diverse groups have all come together with this study. We are all working together. We think it's wonderful. We support it. So we would like time for discussion before construction is completed. We would like this commission to consider implementing this study. And that includes temporary bulb outs. And then a year from now, this enhances our business downtown. Then a year from now, if the commission comes to some sort of consensus, that can be implemented too. It's all about painting lines in the street. So I would strongly encourage this commission to take a serious look at this specific study with Mr. Burden, who advises 800 communities across the planet. He was wonderfully successful in helping design beautiful towns in Montana: Whitefish, Big Fort, Kalispell. So I think it's just a real opportunity. There's an enormous amount of community support behind this, and there's no reason not to implement it right away. And then if the commission decides a year from now or 2 years from now, however time it takes to make all those decisions, then they could implement whatever else they want to do. But in the meantime, we have a wonderful plan and increased business to our downtown. So we'll look forward to presenting this to you and having Mr. Burden here by phone to answer your questions. And by the way, he will answer the question on MDT requirements as well. So I think it'll be very helpful. He has only been doing this for 40 years.
Thank you, Patricia. Any other public comment?
Jason, 325 South Main. When Mr. Carlos gave his summary of options for the downtown, one of them that struck my made a indelible mark in my mind was the extensions on there. Didn't we have enough problems this winter with snow removal there? And now we're talking about street sweepers there with the bulb out. I see absolutely no reason why this should even be considered as an option for our parking situation downtown. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Belle, 311 South 3rd Street. I appreciate your ideas to collaborate with the community and postpone the decision making of what we're going to do with downtown. I'm not a fan of a one-way for Main Street. I think it's for retail, it's for the people. It isn't necessarily to streamline traffic flow. It shouldn't be going through fast. And I think, we have some of the most beautiful streets of a town that are in alignment with the mountains. It's absolutely gorgeous here, and it's a pivot point in our community. I think as we talked about the priority, definitely safety, but I'm not a fan of the curb extensions at all. I think sometimes it can be even more dangerous. So I'm really hoping we don't go that direction as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Amy, would you sign in,
Yes.
please? Thank you.
Hi, Chad Lane, 109 Miller Drive. I'm not originally from Livingston. I was born and raised in Illinois, and right on the Mississippi River, Davenport, Bettendorf, and LeClaire, Moline. They tried this project of going to one-ways, and it averaged the businesses a 30% decrease in income. After about 5 to 10 years, depending on the city, they spent millions of dollars and put it back to a two-way. Increased the business, came back. Main thing that I'm concerned with is the safety. I saw a lot of accidents and a lot of people get injured due to the one-ways. Traffic speed was increased with the one-way. I really like the idea of the back-end parking. The visibility is a lot greater for you to pull out. It's a lot safer. The center line being removed, I think, is probably a good idea. It normally slows traffic down. When you go to a town, or when I go to different places, for example, Estes Park, they had done the same thing in Colorado, and they went back. You go to Main Street to see all the stores, the historic values of the town, things that have happened for hundreds of years there. I think doing the one-way is going to take away from the historic value greatly. People don't go to the main street of town to get out of town. They go for the business, for the atmosphere, for eateries. A lot of people that go on a one-way, including myself, if I go down and can't find a parking space, instead of trying to go around the block 2 or 3 times, I just leave. I go somewhere else. I don't think that's going to help the productivity of Livingston. I don't think it's going to help our income. I don't think it's going to be good for tourism. I think there's a lot of value there in Livingston for its historic value. Livingston is a place where we want to call home, where people want to be, not a place where somebody wants to run through and get out of. There's plenty of other roads that they can leave on. They don't, main streets, in my opinion, a one-way is not the way to go. It just doesn't work. I said, Illinois is 1,400 miles from here, but many cities that have tried that and it did not work. I think it would be a much better choice to leave it the way it is and do the diagonal back-end parking. And as for the curb extensions, what Warren mentioned, I think is a great idea. Make something that's removable. Put it in the summertime and height of tourist season, and something that's removable for winter, so easy access for snow plows and maintenance and things like that. I think that would be a more economical way of going rather than putting a permanent concrete in. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Chad. And thank you, Jay, for your comment. I didn't thank you earlier.
Mike Inman, 227 South D Street. I'm also a member of the Active Transportation Coalition, so I'm wearing a few hats as a parent and also a member of that coalition. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thank you for your consideration of putting together a comprehensive process to engage the public. One thing that I would request in that process is that you take the time to consider all members of our community. Typically, I work for local government and I hold public meetings all the time. And typically you don't have all demographics represented at your commission meetings. There's no children here. Very few people with disabilities here. I think that the underprivileged are not represented in general during a lot of these meetings. And I think when you are talking about improvements to the downtown, especially as it relates to public health and safety and increased access and benefiting community members, I ask that you would at least consider all users and try to put on those perspectives as you're considering that. I hope that public health and safety rises to the top of your list of priorities, or at least is considered in all aspects of the design. For Warren and Clinton and the
institute that we participated in. We conducted a walk audit. We had members present that had disabilities, and it's pretty eye-opening to watch them navigate our downtown. And there were times where our group would have to wait for them to go around the block in order to be able to get up onto a sidewalk. We didn't have children there. Children navigate our world in a very different way than adults that have depth perception and the ability to understand their environment and navigate that. So as you're moving forward, I hope you will consider those people. And then the other thing too, just from a process, I understand the time constraints that Mr. Pardus laid out, but I also know that delaying too far down the road will increase those costs. So maybe putting together a critical path that identifies kind of the design for phase 2 or phase 3 and when this would need to happen and kind of work backwards so you can put together an actual process so that it doesn't work independently of the actual projects that are being implemented. Because if you do that and you miss the boat, you'll miss phase 2 and phase 3, and that will increase your costs over time to come back in, and it will disrupt downtown businesses. So that might be helpful to put together a critical path so you know exactly when those decisions need to be made, and then you can look to your community members and staff to organize those meetings to get that. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Make sure you sign in the height distance. Mike, don't forget to sign in. Michelle Ubaraza. I live at 126 South 8th Street. I also work with the Park County Environmental Council, and we're at 215 East Lewis. I first want to thank the commission and the city manager for opening this up for discussion today. I think it's really a very important conversation, and I really appreciate the priorities that Mr. Cardo set out thinking about. Let's look at the whole picture. What is our downtown? What's our future? What do we all want? I also want to thank all the downtown business owners that are here today because they put a lot of time and energy into thinking about this downtown plan. So I really appreciate that. And what I would like to see is the acceptance of what Mr. Cardo suggested, which is let's gather more comments, let's rank the priorities, and let's think about what we really want collectively for our downtown and make a thoughtful decision. And as a parent, I have 2 small children. I definitely want to echo what Mike said, that public health and safety should be a priority in whatever decision we make. And I really appreciate thinking about how we cross the street, how we navigate downtown from the entire spectrum of visitors, residents, young children, and our senior citizens who also live downtown. So thank you so much for opening this up for discussion, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of our community and hopefully making a really thoughtful plan for how we build our downtown. Thank you, Michelle. And next, public comment.
Good evening. My name is Mariana Rice. I live at 227 South East Street, and I own 2 businesses downtown. I think that one of the key things I heard tonight was this deadline that exists for the June 21st meeting. Items are due by May 18th. So my first question is, currently has the Department of Transportation approved the one-way street for Livingston, or is that something that still has not been approved by them?
It hasn't been on their agenda.
Okay, so then we have time. We have time to look at things. We have time to re-examine it. We are looking currently at a street that is how it's been. In our meeting last night, we heard a lot of people talk about, oh yeah, there was a time when I would get in my car and it was diagonal parking and we listen to music and we cruise around and around and around. And we only had to make right-hand turns. And so there's a lot of nostalgia, I think, behind downtowns. That's really what brings people to them. That's what really activates people when they are looking for a place to shop, looking for a place to live, and looking for a place to just hang out and be a part of. And I think as a downtown business owner, that is also why we exist. For anybody who owns businesses downtown, I would say that probably most of them are making it, but every amount of person that stops in and even buys a $3 item or a $200 bed or a piece of jewelry, those are the reasons that businesses make it. And so if we hear data that says, you know, a 30% drop in business because you have a one-way street, that's something that would hurt the downtown. I also think the children, since my business is open very early in the morning, I see them zooming by on their bikes and stopping in places, grabbing those snacks for breakfast, grabbing something for lunch. And you know, they're going in all these different directions. And to ask the child to leave school to go out and around all the way back up to Park Street or someplace to come back down to the restaurant of their choice or to one of the centers just doesn't seem like the best use of how we need to train them and how they would like to use the streets. So I think this is a great recommendation to open it up. I think if there are other deadlines, that's something that we really need to know about, so that if there is a moment where the DOT needs to make that decision, that we have our ducks in a row, our application process, and moving forward. And working in many other communities, as a planning director, I can say that the local voice speaks loudly. And if you want a street that is 6 inches shorter in order to have that work, I bet NDOT would work with us. The Department of Transportation would work with the community in order to accept what they would like. And that just takes engineers talking to engineers, and it just takes us all wanting something and getting behind a common plan. And I think that that's another piece to this equation, is really looking at the future. Livingston's growing. If we don't have a downtown master plan, if we don't have an area-wide plan, then we're missing out. So thank you again for listening to us, and I look forward to speaking in the future.
Thank you, Mignana. Is it Mignana or Mignana?
Like your Anna,
Maya.
Hi, I'm Colleen Ferris, 209 South High Street. And I am kind of wearing two hats tonight. So I also work for Park County Environmental Council. I'm the community manager, and then I'm on the Active Transportation Coalition. And short and sweet, I guess we just, both organizations would like to prioritize safety. I would like to believe personally too that stands out among or above everything else, regardless of the details that kind of suck you down and generally start to talk about money. I would like to believe that everyone would like to agree on safety as our priority. And so regardless of one way or two way, I think we would leave that up to the experts and our engineers. We would like to ask that all the safety measures possible are included in the design. And that includes the curb extensions. Additionally, the Active Transportation Group would be happy to implement demonstration projects to highlight some of the benefits and kind of test out some of these projects that maybe the rest of the community would like to test the waters on. And so just to highlight what we already have going is the pedestrian flag project was implemented in time for the Baki, which was really nice, and we got some really great feedback on that. So that's at Park and Main, and there were a lot of community partners who helped us build them, including the high school welders. So that's essentially taking the flags back and forth across the street to raise awareness to motorists of the pedestrians crossing those areas. Additionally, we have the temporary curb extensions in progress. Those will also be built by Mr. Isley's class at the high school as a way to just kind of the community and the commissioners and folks in the decision-making seats to test them out. Yeah, and we would be open to hearing other suggestions on projects if there is a trial period, and I'm grateful that there's a discussion going on and there's something that we want to try out. Potentially the Active Transportation Coalition could team up and design both them. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
I have a question. Let's say you do go to a one-way and the children are coming out of school, they're on their bicycles, and they ride the wrong way up the street. Are commission gonna turn their head? Are we going to rely on the policeman to go away from other duties that are more important to regulate the children not riding a bicycle the wrong way on the one way to go to the Pickle Barrel or one of their favorite stores or hangouts? Where does that stand? You know, I mean, what's the law on that? Does that require an officer to take time out of his day?
Well, I would start by saying that children's safety is probably the highest priority of the police.
I agree.
So if they take the time to make sure the kids are safe, I would fully support that.
No, I agree with that, but
And I would expect them to do that.
I
So
just see another problem there with all the children.
I don't think children, maybe I have a higher opinion of our children than most people, but I think they're highly capable. I think they can figure out a one way street. But that is all conversation we can have.
Okay.
I mean, and that is the intent, is to have those conversations. But I really do think our kids are pretty smart and can adjust to a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But I think that's absolutely stuff that will be in these discussions, and we'll figure out what is the best.
I just think that's important. So.
Sure, child safety is absolutely important.
If I could just add to that, I wouldn't have my kids ride a bike on the street downtown the way it is now, even, you know, with the way the diagonal parking is. It's dangerous. And they ride on the sidewalks anyway, they're not supposed to.
Any last public comments? So, commissioners, any last questions before the motion? So we have in front of us, to reiterate, a recommendation by the city manager to organize really a coalition of people along with documents on our study or different studies to reconsider how we look holistically at the downtown. Would that be the gist of the whole thing, everyone? So as far as making a motion, our motion should reflect, how would we best want to say it, I guess? Jay, do you want to help us with that, or Mike?
I can take a stab at it.
Something to do with recommending the approving the recommendation of the city manager in relationship to one. Tara, do you want to try?
Yeah, I would just make a motion that we maintain two-way traffic on Main Street and move forward with a collaborative, community-based discussion to address Main Street's concerns as itemized of recommendations from the city manager.
One motion, good.
Sometimes I have to.
That's good. Okay, so we have a motion by Sarah and a second by Sandberg and a second by Megan. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Holden,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
For.
Commissioner Freeman.
For.
Commissioner Sandberg. For. Commissioner Maybe.
Yes.
Motion passes. So next on our agenda, we're moving back to our proclamations, and tonight we have two proclamations. Our first proclamation is Public Works Week, the power of public works. Whereas public works infrastructure, facilities, and services are vital to the health, safety, and well-being of the residents of Livingston, Montana, and whereas such facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, engineers, and administrators who are responsible for building, operating, and maintaining the public works system that serves our citizens, and whereas the Public Works Association instituted Public Works Week as a public education campaign to inform communities and their leaders on the importance of our nation's public infrastructure and public works services. And whereas It is the public interest of citizens and civic leaders to gain knowledge of the public works needs and programs of their respective communities, whereas Public Works Week also recognizes the contributions of public works professionals. Now, therefore, I, Jarrell Hoagland, Chairperson of the Livingston City Commission, do hereby proclaim the week of May 20th through 26th, 2018 as Public Works Week in Livingston, Montana. Thank you, Public Works people. Our second proclamation tonight is Youth Week proclamation for May 14th, 2018 to May 20th, 2018. The Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks has designated May 14th, 2018 to May 20th, 2018 as Youth Week to honor America's junior citizens for their accomplishments and to give fitting recognition of their services to community, state, and nation. And whereas the Livingston Elks Lodge will sponsor an observation during that week in tribute to the junior citizens of this community. And whereas no event could be more deserving of our support and participation than one dedicated to these young people who represent the nation's greatest resources and who in the years ahead will assume the responsibilities for the advancement of our free society. Whereas our youth need the guidance, inspiration, and encouragement which we alone can give in order to help develop these qualities of character essential for future leadership and go forth to serve America. And whereas to achieve this worthy objective, we should demonstrate our partnership with youth, our understanding of their hopes and aspirations, and sincere willingness to help prepare them in every way for the responsibilities and opportunities of citizenship. Now therefore, I, Jarrell Hoagland, Chairperson of the Livingston City Commission, do hereby proclaim the third week of May 2018 as Youth Week and urge all departments of government, civic, fraternal, and patriotic groups, and our citizens generally to participate wholeheartedly in this observation. And I want to thank the Elks for all the hard work they do for our community as well. Tonight we have no scheduled public comment, we have no public hearings, and no ordinances. We have one resolution. We have resolution number 4791, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, in support of recommending and encouraging Congress to create a reliable, predictable stream of resources to address deterred maintenance needs in America's national park system. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this resolution came to us from the American National Park or Park Council, I believe, and it was just applied to you as a courtesy. I think I had two commissioners that said they'd like to see it on the agenda, so it is available to you. It really just is attempting to encourage Congress to address the deferred maintenance costs that are in the national park system, and obviously, national parks are important to Livingston and Park County.
So opening it up to public comments. Any public comments on resolution number 4791? Public comment. Opening it to the commission. Any questions or comments on resolution number 4791?
I'm just confused with national parks, with the state agencies, state soliciting the state, or is the state soliciting the feds? So they're soliciting the Fed. Are other states, this is part of a multiple state coalition, or is Montana looking at this independently to only impact the parks for Montana?
So this is actually from the Restore America's Parks campaign, which is a nonprofit. And this is from the Montana chapter of Restore America's Parks. So it's a nonprofit that looks to advocate for the national parks.
Right. I just noticed in our information, it was only parks in Montana that were listed, and so I'm trying to understand the bigger picture. If we're providing support for funding for Montana, or are we providing support for all national parks?
Well, this particular, the way it came from Restore America's Parks, they're trying to get it to focus locally, so they want you to focus on your local legislatures for your local area. And then they're doing that nationwide. So it's a nationwide effort, but they're just asking us to look local.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just didn't know if it, they get funding and then, it's a national effort and then it gets sliced away into other states and not here based on that effort. So just want to make sure that there's a presence and designation.
There is. And this particular one comes from Montana coordinator, so it's specific to the state.
Any other commission comments? The only thing I would have to say is this is an issue that obviously impacts us as a community that is visited by many people from the park in general, and from Yellowstone. So I think supporting this is important because it's also part of our community as well. Any other before we make a motion? Do I have a motion from the commission on resolution number 4791?
Be honored to make a motion to approve resolution 4791.
Second.
So we have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hoagland.
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Four.
Commissioner Friedman.
Four.
Commissioner Sanders. Four. Commissioner Maybe.
Four. Motion passes. Tonight we have two more action items. Our first action item, which had been delayed for time purposes, and the second time of visiting this, we have Julia Martin's request for vacation of alley property. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there's no new information on this. This was just to allow you guys an extra couple of weeks to look at the information. So again, my recommendation was I think this is a unique situation, or at least one of the situations where vacation would be in the best interest of the citizens. It would not be harmful to the city. Again, there is a risk associated with it, but I think the risk is fairly small. At least that's the way we look at it, analyzing the surrounding property and how it will be developed. We don't see a particular need for that small section of alley that runs into that. That's all I have.
It is tabled. So I guess technically we should pick it up off the table. So I guess we technically need a motion to bring it off the table so we can talk about it.
So this was tabled for future discussion. Can we get a motion from the commission to take it off the table?
I make a motion to take action item E off the discussion table.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
For discussion.
To take it off the table for discussion,
sorry.
We
right?
can discuss about taking it off the table if you want.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Chairperson Hoagland.
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Four.
Commissioner Friedman.
Four.
Commissioner Sanders. Four. Commissioner Maybe.
Four. Motion passes. So now that we have it back on the table, we wanted more time to look at the information. Do we have any public comment first on the vacation of this alley? Okay. Any more public comment? Commissioner, questions or comments at this time?
You had mentioned earlier at the previous meeting where commissioners had vacated easements or alleyways, sorry. And it ended up not being favorable. Can you share those examples with us?
Yes, near the bowling alley behind, there's a business that asked to vacate an alley or an easement. And we decided for the vacation of this easement, and it ended up being potentially a route for Sun Avenue, for a safer route for Sun Avenue, which we didn't know at the time. And that's one example. Another one that actually I got clarification on, and was right in that same area. There was an easement that goes to Fleshman Creek from, trying to think which street, Q, that was vacated, but in looking back at it, there's actually still an easement for trail, which at the time I didn't realize, and then I had to clarify and get clarification. Mike actually helped me find that, and so I'm not bummed about it because I think it's a perfect area for a connector, and that was one. And then it seems like there was one more up on. You have to think through. Well, with Northwest Energy, that was a different type of easement issue. But I do regret my decision on the one above or near Sun Drive, because in retrospect, it could have been used to the advantage of the community on the north side, for example. Just a couple. And so I will state, after what I consider my mistake of making that decision in the past. I mean, I was just one vote, but who knows, had I understood it more at the time, I think I would have said no to that decision, but I also swore I'd never vacated another easement after that because I saw it as a big mistake. And so for me to actually be considering one without thinking no is kind of a step I'm trying to get back to, because I still worry, but I looked at this one, this is the third time, and I'm actually more comfortable than I had been. So, other commissioner comments? Warren?
Well, with nothing imminent where it could be an advantage to keep it, it certainly would be an advantage to vacate it to the overall property. It's like almost like borders on hoarding, where you want to keep a hold of everything. And I think it would be a better choice to vacate it, since there's nothing, that looks like it would be valuable for something else.
I would just like to add, the current owner does wish to subdivide that property and put another building on it, which would add to the tax rolls. There's no guarantee she will do that, but yeah, having looked at this for the third time and on a case by case thing, I see it warrants approval. The abandonment.
Any other commission comments? So do I have a motion on the request for vacation of the LA property on Kaiser, right? Clark.
Lewis.
Approve the vacation of the property.
I'll second. Action on item E.
So we have a motion by Megan and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hopland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
For.
Commissioner Freeman,
For.
Commissioner Sandberg,
Against.
Commissioner Meady,
Yes.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda is action item B. To authorize city manager to sign the host site application for the National Center for Appropriate Technologies Energy for AmeriCorps program, the NCAP. Mr. Carters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you may remember Mr. Baird came in and presented this to you in public comment, in scheduled public comment. We went back and Shannon went and sat down with Parks Brady with the County Public Works and looked through what we could use this position for and how we could fund it. They both said it would probably be a useful position. There are many energy initiatives that we can look at around the city. Most of them would at least be a long-term payoff, and we can look at what the cost is. I was looking for what the cost of this particular position is. I think our portion is 75 something.
5750.
How much was it, Shannon?
5,750.
5750. So 5750 is our section of that. Looking through where it would be used, it's probably mostly going to be funded out of the Public Works Enterprise Funds. So it won't affect the general fund budget that we looked at, and then it'll be included in the enterprise funds that we present to you in early June. Overall, obviously, in the enterprise funds, $5,700 is a huge amount. But we believe there's enough work for this position to benefit both the city and the county, and especially teaming up with the county in buildings like the city-county building is going to be very useful. So our half, I think, is worth the money to get someone in, look at the energy projects. If we can get someone accomplished, that's great, but just an inventory that would give us a list of, hey, these are the projects, and these are the ones that'll pay out, and these are the ones that won't, will be very, very useful to the city in the long term.
Do you have any public comment on action item B?
Did I pronounce your name right, Jim?
It's pronounced Berg. So, excuse me, Jim Berg. My address is 223 South Fifth Street. And thank you very much for giving this proposal your consideration. I've been meeting with Parks and Shannon a couple of times now to go over the application to get the wording right. We also ran the application by Nicole Devine, who's now managing the fairgrounds, and I ran it by Lonnie Starsovich, who's the administrator of the program, to look at what we had written to get feedback from that. So we've gone through a couple of iterations of the application, and we're hoping to get it finalized in the next week. And they have a deadline of June 4th for the applications to begin, so that was one of my worries. How do we get both the county and the city to approve this? And I think is a very workable solution to have us work through and finalize the wording of the application, have the city manager go over that and approve it, and then sign off on that. So, barring that, if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer that. Thank you very much. Yes.
So I'm familiar with AmeriCorps volunteers working in different entities, and my experience has been, it's just that they're volunteers. So this is the first time I've seen where the entity receiving the person is being asked to pay. And I'm just trying to understand the difference with this component as opposed to, I guess, the AmeriCorps Business Program that I'm familiar with, where the entity doesn't provide any funding. So I'm just trying to understand the difference.
I can speculate on that. I don't really know. I know that this program started a long time ago. Maybe we had more money to put into worthwhile efforts. I think probably when they set up this program, there was less federal dollars to support it. And so they're basically asking for some cost sharing on the program. I think that's a good idea, just in the sense that then you've got some money in the game, and that you're going to be concerned that the money that you're expending in this position is going to be less. So it's not a lot of money, certainly, especially since it's going to be split with the county, and the county has approved their share of this position, so they're going to be signing the application with it.
And then how do you fill the position, and how, I think it's what, 11,000 between the city and the county. So is this a part-time position? Does your entity supplement the salary? What's the funding mechanism look like?
It's a full-time, 1-year position. Actually, I think there's some training involved. It's actually probably 11 months. So I am not clear as to whether or not there's some additional funding that goes into meeting their salary. I would assume so, given the fact that the money that the city and the county is contributing to it isn't enough for a salary. But, they're working for low wages, and they also get a stipend at the end of their year for apply to our school and college.
And so you mentioned some training. So how, what's their acumen then in the energy world to make assessments if they're getting paid low wages and getting training?
Part of the application request is for us to put together a list of the qualifications that the city and the county would want to have in that person. So that's part of what we'll be looking at. So then once that's done and it's been submitted to NCAP, then they will use those criteria. They're then going to solicit applications and then they're going to try to do the match. And then once they winnow that down, that applicant or number of applicants will come to Livingston, make the rounds, visit with people. We will get a chance to get a sense of what kind of people they are and whether they will be a good fit for the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have just a statement on an experience I had with this type of person or position. So our school that I work at, so I work at the middle school, we had an energy audit done through a volunteer or a stipend paid person who came to our school and did an energy audit on, and not just ours, it ended up going over to the high school as well, that to look at the lighting, the changes that we could do to be more efficient with energy. And we had the governor and 10 other people from the state here celebrating the event afterwards because we were saving in January, I think it was, don't quote me exactly, but we saved $15,000 in energy expenses because of the audit and how it was approached. So when I saw this, I was looking forward to the city and county going through this process to save money to that level. So I actually think this is a great idea. And working with AmeriCorps, I know recently people, entities, including the school, had AmeriCorps volunteers and they did have to pay some whatever stipend, because that's how the program now has changed. So you pay the stipend. It's not even up to, they don't get paid that much anyway, but it's more for the program and the administration of the program as well. But I think this is a great use of our money because I see it again in that big picture way that we will save money down the road by using this individual to help analyze and look at our situation. So appreciate it. Any other comments? So do we have a motion on action item B?
I guess I'll make that motion to approve action item B.
Second.
So we have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Four.
Commissioner Friedman.
Four.
Commissioner Sandberg. Four. Commissioner Meady.
4.
Motion passes. Next, on our agenda, we have city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to give a quick update on some of the stuff that's going on, we talked a little bit about some of it. I just want to give you the update on the parking code enforcement officer. Obviously, you see the numbers that are coming out in the annual or the monthly statements coming from the court. That is probably number one driver of the increase in ticketing is the what we've been doing, specifically on Main Street in the construction area. Also, talking to some of the guys, there have been, not only have we been successful in enforcing it, there's been actually a change in behavior in Main Street and that people are starting to follow the 2-hour limit as the enforcement goes on. That'll continue. As I said, we're going to hold a meeting and talk about some of the other enforcement areas outside of Main Street. That was the focus, obviously, to begin with because of the construction. We want to make sure that got under control right away so that all available parking was available. And as long as we're on this topic of downtown, if you guys haven't had a chance to get out and go walk around the construction, please do. Those guys are doing an awesome job right now. They've been on or ahead of schedule in every one of the tasks they've been doing so far. And they have been, I've walked around downtown and talked to some of the business owners, and almost universally, everyone's very happy with their flexibility and their responsiveness. So COP's doing a great job. If you see them, let them know. They have been very responsive to the citizens downtown. So that's been a really good thing. To get out and look at the wastewater treatment plant, we'll try and set up another tour again sometime. That's progressing really well. And if you get a chance, go check out the skate park. They actually started doing the concrete work this week. It's pretty awesome. I don't know how they do it, but it's starting to look like a skate park. So if you get a chance, get down there and take a look. We've been very fortunate that all three contractors working right now are doing an excellent job. So we've made good progress on all of those, and I hope to report that some of them are close to completion in the next couple of months. So thank you.
Commissioner comment or statements, comments? Warren?
The skate park board reported they last I heard they had at least a $25,000 donation in hand towards the I believe 65,000 that they're working towards, and several other really good prospects. So they're doing a great job.
And we have the skater police coming up.
Back.
Anything else, Warren?
Oh yeah, whoever's building the skate park on a weekend took it upon themselves, probably illegally, to move 3 Jersey barriers onto the old skate park and cement them together. So they created a wall.
Yeah. Well, that will all go along.
They're skaters.
Yeah. Sarah?
She notified the police.
Yeah, I just, so street sweeping, I watched, this day that I work from home and my office overlooks the streets, and when the gentleman came by, I appreciate the fact that he came over just in front of my house 3 times to make sure he got everything, so I appreciate that attention to detail and pride in work. But again, I was disappointed because I guess I thought I heard Mikey say that, I mean, it wasn't going to be 100% patrol, but I thought we were going to try and ticket people in the street sweeping. And my street was a big violation, and it was disappointing not to see people ticketed because the behavior's not going to change unless they do. And I realize that we can't be everywhere at the same time, but I guess I just ask if it's possible to have them, 4 hours one day, 3 hours the next, change the patrol or something. I mean, I realize we're taking them away from a regular route, but if we can maybe make those small adjustments periodically just to help keep people realize that we are trying to enforce the ordinances, I think that would help.
I'd like to speak that real quick. And we absolutely will figure out the best way to do that. But we are still, and I know it's complicated because we have all these moving parts, but we still don't have actually that officer.
Okay.
We have the officer that's designated to do the job, but we still haven't hired the replacement officer to get the regular route. So we're not at full strength yet as far as that goes. We have that out for hire now, and we're hoping to hire on 1 July at the start of our new fiscal year.
Okay.
So that's when we'll actually have the extra officer to do that. Right now, everybody's filling in as they can.
Gotcha.
So that we have the officer designated as the code enforcement officer, but he won't be able to do that full time until a replacement officer comes in.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the last one is just a request that maybe we could have a little bit of a educational presentation on our residential zoning, R1. I spent a lot of time walking. I spent a lot of time in the alleys because they're interesting. And when I look at all the R1 zoning and I see all of these garages that have been converted to apartments, is again a violation of our code. I'm looking right here that R1 residential is not allowed 2 units. You're allowed 1 unit only. And I realize if they want to get away with trying to get a variance and do a lot split, they can do a second home. But it's really changing the community of a residential R1 district where people are expecting or living in an area with single family homes. So I'm trying to understand why these additional homes on lots where, again, I'm just looking at the code right now, 2 units are not available on an R1 lot. And so how are these things popping up and why?
And I'll get the, we'll do some research as soon as we get
I
done.
mean, are we not monitoring? Are we just letting people convert their garages? There just doesn't seem to be any monitoring of what's going on. And back to the traffic issue, there's parts, Yellowstone, Fifth Street, et cetera, that are R1. You can't get down the alley because of the parking, and it's creating a big problem. Not to mention a transient population for people who are living in what they thought was an R1 residential, and it's not.
Some of it depends on how they convert it and what's inside the conversion, whether or not it qualifies as a dwelling unit. So there's some of that going on, but I can give you an overview of what.
Well, and it also talks about single family. So even if they did convert it, you now have multiple families, which again is against the R1 zoning. So I just think it's something we really need to look at because it doesn't seem to be enforced and it seems to be growing. Thank you.
No?
Just a cute story of downtown construction when it first started. They were working near the First Interstate Bank, and the customer came in and blasted Joe Hanser, the president of the bank, for the construction. So, take the heat off the city a little bit.
Or Joe.
Joe
He's
can
short.
take it.
Joe, yeah, he's a short timer anyway.
I feel sad he's not here to experience.
I know.
I'm gonna just piggyback on what Sarah was saying about the units that you're talking about. I want to guess that the majority of them, nobody applied for a building permit. They're illegal. I mean, they've just been converted without anything. So, it's a matter of, somebody taking the time to go down the alleys and inventory, so, yeah.
But it's.
I know, but if he sees, yeah, I know, but the thing is, as the neighbor sees something, say something, I've called BS on a few things like that I've seen going on, so.
I have two and I've not gotten very far. So that's why I'm bringing it up here.
But anyway, yeah, I have gone downtown and walked around, or went up the way I walk, and have visited the businesses and stuff like that. And overall, people are very happy with the progress of the way the contractor has been treating them, and you couldn't ask for anything more than that. It was a pleasure for the city to host hockey last week. We had Mineral County, Glasgow, Columbus, various other places, and Warren I did that a year ago, reviewed, and Warren got to sit in for all 3 days. It's about building safe, active communities, and making it pedestrian and bike friendly, and automobile. So the more we go to those things, the more we learn. And actually, Patricia has learned a lot just by, I forgot this guy's name. I don't know if he did an actual study, if he did, but Mark Fenton has done, I believe, 3 walk audits now of our downtown in our area. And he's also a nationally known expert in this field as well.
I'd like to just tack onto that real quick. While Becky was here, and that was great, I forgot to tell you there's an opportunity this coming Thursday at 10. Is that going to be down on Main Street, Shannon?
It's undecided if it's going to start here in the community room or if we're just going to do it down on the construction site.
But the Montana Infrastructure Coalition is coming to town, and they're going to highlight our downtown work as one of the first things that has been done with the additional gas tax. So they're going to highlight the work that we're doing down there, and obviously they're going to have to see group for infrastructure throughout all of Montana. So, and we'd like to drop in. I'm sure they'd love to have you say how wonderful the infrastructure project is. We'll try and send out, just help me remind me to send out an invitation to where it's going to be, but it should be 10 o'clock on Thursday morning.
So I have a couple of things. Spring cleanup went very well. Everyone said it was very efficient, it was timely, so I know our community did appreciate the work that the city did. I was going to say something about positive about the downtown, but I think everyone has said it. I think it's going very well. Yes. There is a little garbage can issue that someone pointed out, and I did see that by the skate park, I think the garbage can is on the other side of one of the barriers, so if it's not able to be picked up or maybe not noticed, and garbage is flowing out all over at this stage. I saw it last night and it was flowing out, so I think someone needs to somehow get in so it's, you can get to it, or their staff can get to it. And then someone told me while they were out walking. Green cans, I know Mike, I asked you about this yesterday. Looking at that down the road, what was that, your timeline again?
So we're going to look at both green cans and recycling probably late summerish, because we're probably not going to be in any place for this summer. That gives us time to figure out what we want to do for next summer. Basically expanding the green can program but if we're going to expand it, it's going to have to be a day service. Right now, it's obviously only for a very limited number of residents, and even those residents have to share. So we're looking at it, if it's something the community would like to implement community-wide, they would have to become a day service.
Yeah, they share it with 4 neighbors. I use it twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. That's it. And I put the grass back down on the grass. It's supposed to be.
Yeah, we can
have a good debate.
And the last thing is, I had mentioned this last time about summer meeting times. Did anyone look at anything?
Well, I voted for the 4th. I vote for that.
Eliminating that one.
For us to have one, I thought you were voting for it, but yes, let's have it.
Yeah, really.
I vote to eliminate that.
So.
But
I thought that was consensus anyway. I
Yeah,
guess
but we
have
didn't
it. I
decide
guess we
on if we were going
To make
have
it up.
one meeting,
I think just one.
and move it to the, I think it's what we discussed, like, for business
And also-
sake. What was it, Mike? What's our business timeline, like, when we have to do?
But we have a little more flexibility now that we're doing the approval of the bills and claims differently, so it really is up to you guys.
Kind of agenda driven anyway, too. Yeah.
Honestly, if we can get the enterprise funds done by the end of June, I think you can take the whole month of July.
Just doesn't seem very responsible.
Well, I think it's good for everyone. We want a recharged and energetic commission.
Absolutely.
Who are these people that get summers off? I want one of those jobs.
So that might be a possibility then to either do one meeting with a smallish agenda just for business, or, I mean, if we wanted to approach in a regular, normal agenda, I should say. Should we do it the normal day of the 3rd Tuesday of the month?
That'd be the 17th.
Or move it to the 10th and have one, or consider and maybe decide next time not having one at all in July. There's our 3 options.
I vote for nothing on the 3rd. And the 10th's out. That's too close.
Yeah, it's too close.
People are out of town. Some of us.
Go to the 4th.
And leave it open for the 17th just to see how business goes.
Yeah,
And can I seek a clarification on that? You guys are going ahead and paying bills before we approve it, right?
Yes.
So it's really not an issue.
It is not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
If we had a timely issue that needed, approval or not, then so should we keep that as a tentative?
Sure.
Yeah.
And that might give you, honestly, give you an opportunity to maybe get to some questions that haven't been able to.
Give you some time.
Give some time to produce some of the stuff that you guys would like.
So that is all I had. So I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion by Freeman and second by Schwartz. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is adjourned at 8:37.
We do.
Which now, do you remember the day that when I said,
Yeah, right. No one knew what to do.
I know.
It's like a sales job.
No.
That's why you had a meeting today also. Yeah, but it wasn't contentious.